Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joy Hawkins, our host for today, and I'm joined by the fabulous Guy Sakalakis from Michigan, and he's going to be actually our host for our next event. So we really wanted to get him on a webinar before then, so that we could chat a bit about the upcoming event, about everything to do with links. There's so many questions. Before I get you to introduce yourself, Guy, did I say your last name right finally?
You nailed it, Joy. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be here and also very, very excited for everybody to join us in Detroit.
Yeah, we've never done an event in Detroit, so I like it because it's like driving distance for me. I'm just gonna haul everybody in my van across the border and see you there. But I know today we are going to be talking about link building, which we were discussing like what topic to do for the webinar, and I was like, you know what? There's been a lot of conversations about link building, and I also know that Guy is well known for talking about link building because you work with lawyers, and lawyers are definitely in need of links, but there's been some buzz lately that I thought would be good to kick off with. Google, a Googler, I should say a Googler, not Google, made a statement recently about how links don't really matter as much. And it's kind of getting picked up by some news sources. And I want to say pulled out of context a little bit. But for those that maybe don't know what I'm referring to, I'll have Richard put it up on the screen. And yeah, literally the title of this article is Google confirms links are not that important. Guy, what are your thoughts on this?
I love it. Stop building links, everybody. It'll make my job a lot easier.
Ooh.
I over the years and I always tell people too, I'm like, look, I don't work at Google. I'm not a search engineer. I'll just tell you from what I've seen over the last, 15 years of doing this, sites that get links tend to rank. And the other thing I always challenge people, and I'd love to see if people in the audience, if you can give me examples. Every once in a while, someone has an example, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can rank a site without links." Like, show
Hmm.
me. And it'll be
Mm.
some obscure query that no one's really searching for, or they'll be doing some kind of other aggressive spam and local. I'm like, okay, but those are fringe cases. I mean, you can go pop open any search engine result page right now, any competitive query, I bet you lunch, most of the sites on there have pretty significant links, and particularly in legal.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to owe anybody lunch in Detroit. You should be good. Also, I just want to shout out to Doug here. I think everybody wishes they had Guy's hair. So yeah,
I'm due for a haircut, but thank you.
um, yeah, I think so. From what I understood about the comment, it was more along the lines of links matter less than they did years ago, and we're not sure how many years we're talking here. I think there's possibly some truth to that. Like, I don't think Googlers come out here and just like stirring the pot. I mean, maybe you might say that about Gary. He does like to stir the pot a little bit, but I think like there's a possibility that they don't matter as much as they did in, I don't know, 2006, 2007, but like by how much? Like they didn't say by how much. Like maybe they were like, 60% weight. Now they're 59.5. Like who knows, right? Like we don't know the context of like how much they didn't say. But to your point, I would really caution SEOs when they hear stuff like this, not to just hear to be like, oh, okay, there goes all my link building, right? Like it's one of those things. If you're not seeing the results of link building, you're probably doing it wrong, which is what we want to talk about today, right?
Yeah,
There's a right and
exactly.
wrong way.
And that's the thing is like, I think it's in the context of, I think it's pretty obvious Google is trying to use a lot more signaling data. So as a total piece of the signaling pie, sure, links might represent a smaller portion of that pie, but gosh, they still seem to move the dial. The other thing I always tell people to think about is that, everybody can go copy your web pages right now. They can go copy your URL structure. They can copy your internal linking structure. They can crawl your site and copy your content. They can make, you can tell them to take it down. But, that's the stuff that's kind of table stakes. Everybody can do that stuff. What's the gatekeeper? And the gatekeeper still links to a large extent.
Yeah, for sure. So I have some really specific questions about link building that I want to get into. Of course, our audience guys, like you got questions, put them in the chat. We will try and address them as we go. So we really want to make sure you get all your questions answered. But to kind of start off, let's talk about the core update that's still going on. I really didn't think that I'd say that like during this webinar that, this late April webinar that the March core update is still happening, but it's still happening. And we've been told by a lot of people that it has a high link component to it. So sites that were doing aggressive link building tactics, things like that, are getting hit like crazy. What have you seen so far? What as it pertains to the current update that's happening?
Not much in the SERPs that I look at. And, and I'm sympathetic and empathetic to folks that are, their sites are getting hammered, and, there's the Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days is filled with horror stories about this latest update. But, and some of it's probably because I'm very focused on legal, and some of it's probably because most of the law firms we work with, they're not doing anything that egregious. And so I think it's the really bad stuff that I think is getting hit. But I will tell you, I still see plenty of stuff that's quote unquote link spam on sites that are still ranking pretty well, even in legal.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a gap of like I feel like there's always that gray area, and there's the things that Google tells you not to do, and then there's like the really, really extreme examples of that. And anytime I've seen like penalties, it's been targeted towards the really extreme examples. So manual link penalties is an interesting thing because there's obviously the algorithmic penalties, which I've seen. We did see a client last year who was doing, I wouldn't say aggressive link building, but they had about 400 links built over the course of 2 years. For a small business, that's a lot. I would say it's above normal for sure. And what we saw with the algorithm update last year is that all the pages that had links built to them were starting to decline in rankings and decline in traffic for the next consecutive months, starting with the algorithm update that happened last March, not this March. So I do think that what often happens with the core updates, anyways, that I see is it doesn't hit our clients, it hits the sites they're getting the links from. And I think that's the way that Google solves this algorithmically is like, let's say, for example, you have like geescoolestlinks.com and you're like linking out to all these lawyers and it's pretty spammy and your site is really only there for SEO and like nobody really cares about your site other than SEOs. Google's trying to target those sites. So let's say they hit your site, then all of a sudden everyone that you are linking to now is no longer getting as much credit or value because Google's hitting your site, your pages are getting unindexed. All that's happening. That's what we've been seeing anyways. I don't know if that rings true for what you're seeing on your end.
Well, the other thing, I think of some of the big sites that we know are brokering links, whether the people that own the site want them to be, some of these big publisher sites. I mean, we could name names. I tend not to want to name names to get folks in trouble, but to me, the big thing, you got three buckets of links. You've got bucket one is links that help. Bucket, and we'll spend most of hopefully our time talking about links that help. Then bucket two is, which I think is the biggest bucket, links that do nothing. And I think
Mm.
that a lot of the links that you're talking about, Google's gotten pretty good at, especially post Penguin 4, just kind of devaluing them. Like they're there and people are still building them, but they're not really doing anything. They're not triggering manual actions, but they're not helping that much. And then there's another, but then bucket three is the ones that are actually hurting. And whether there's some kind of, people talk about algorithmic dampening effect or manual actions. I think that represents a much smaller subset. But I think for the most part, when I see a lot of these, spammy link, and I get the emails too, most of them they don't do much. They don't do anything. Whether, not really hurting, not really helping. They're just kind of like taking up server space.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to get into the weeds here because we're going to get questions about very specific types of link building tactics, which is good. I don't want to be broad. I feel like sometimes when I hear talks on link building, it's like very broad. It's like, oh, you should build links. Cool. Can you tell me how? Can you tell me where? You know what I mean? And there's nothing in there. So I don't want to do that with this webinar. So I want to get very specific here. So let's deal with some questions that are coming in because these are more important than the ones I wrote down. So first up, press releases. Let's talk about that. What have you found with press releases? Good strategy, bad strategy?
So I tell people, I'm like, if you're doing like just submit it to like some PR news site, it's not newsworthy, totally a waste of time and money. Now, on the other hand, if you have something newsworthy, and I've said this, but I think got to keep qualifying it. Most of the businesses we work with at Attorney Sync are law firms. Well, they're all law firms at Attorney Sync. There's another agency we work with, other business, but most of the businesses we work with, they're local businesses. And look, if you've got something newsworthy to share and you distribute that in a, press release site and it gets picked up by local news sites or local journalists are interested in it, awesome. But I think what the question is really about is like, these massive at scale press release sites, like getting links from those, I would say don't waste your time.
We've tried a handful of them the last few years. I've not been able to measure any type of result from it. I will say that, like, yes, there are unicorns out there, but like 99.9% of the stuff that our clients think is newsworthy is not actually newsworthy. So I think there's a big disconnect there. There are some stories, but it's like the unicorn. So personally, when it comes to strategies, I would not chase unicorns. Here's another good
Agreed.
one. What are your thoughts on getting links from forums such as Reddit? Reddit's everywhere in Google search results these days. And I really love to hear, Guy, like, lawyers are now competing against Reddit and Quora and like other forums that are outranking their law firms. So should they be getting links from them? Should they be commenting on them? What are you recommending?
Well, this is another great thing about links. We're really talking when we talk about links, most especially the intersection of links and SEO. People think, well, links to rank my site, links to rank my pages. But links can do all sorts of other things. They can generate business for you. They can generate PR. They can generate, actual like qualified leads. And so I think being active, truly active for real, not just like fake posting in Reddit, but if you're actually engaged, I love the local subreddits that are active in a community for being engaged in conversations there. And if you have a link there to something that's part of the conversation that makes sense, you can drive visitors back. And a lot of those visitors, like they'll be like, oh yeah, some of them might actually call you and hire you or buy from you. And so I think presence there is great. Now, from in terms of like quote unquote SEO link juice, I hate to say that, but that's the way a lot of people think about it. I it's to me, it's like, yeah, maybe some, but I think about it in the same context as like commenting. Going out and spamming a bunch of sites for blog comments isn't going to do anything. But like a thoughtful comment on a highly visited local blog can be super valuable. And I also think that the search engines getting better at taking that into consideration too. So I think that they probably count more than people like to want them to count.
Yeah, we're in the process right now of doing some testing around no followed links, right? Because all Reddit's links are no followed. And so far, the big thing that I've been seeing is that no followed links really don't do a lot. Like there is a big difference between a no follow, do follow. Although I've heard do follow isn't even a term, it's a term SEO. Followed and no followed links. Let's just say that. But what's interesting is that a lot of these queries, let's say lawyers are competing for with Reddit, are not actually discussions where they really can weigh in. So for example, best divorce lawyers in Phoenix. Let's say there's a thread on the Phoenix Reddit subreddit, that's talking about who are the best lawyers, like who should I hire? I know people who are buying aged Reddit accounts and going on and recommending themselves. I know you're shaking your head. You're a lawyer, so this is a perfect question to pose for you. Like, business owners are already doing this. What are they risking by doing that?
Well, again, I have wearing two of the worst professional labels you can: ambulance chasing trial lawyer and SEO spammer. And the thing that this comes up all the time, and lawyers, if there are lawyers listening in, they know that they've got rules of professional conduct that are governing them, and they're responsible if they pay somebody, an agency, to do something, and it violates the rules of professional conduct. Arguably, they can be found accountable for that with their state bar. And so the short version of that is, if you pretend to be somebody else or you pretend to make an endorsement of your firm, it's pretty clearly at least misleading, if not a false communication about your services. And you can have bar consequences of that. And the other thing too is, and we'll see, because there's still a lot of TBD on this, but the FTC is getting much more active about this. Like, we think about it in the context of fake reviews, but it's no different, right? If you go on to one of these subreddits and you're like, this is the best law firm in the country, and it's you writing that about yourself under somebody else's name, that's misleading. Like, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's part of the mess that we're in with the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I hear you. So let's talk about the worst type of thing that you could have happen for links. Well, I shouldn't say the worst. One of the worst things. I know when I first started the industry, getting a manual action was like, the kiss of death. It's the thing that like nobody wants and is everybody's afraid of getting. So they're almost afraid to like push too hard for links because it's like, oh, I don't want a manual action. So I hadn't seen a manual action in like, I don't know, 5 years. Like it's been a very long time. And there was a bunch handed out recently. So I'm curious to know, do you know of any sites that got one recently, like in the last 6 months?
No,
You
I've been waiting, and I've had calls out to the public and legal, like, hey, if you got, and look, I get it. People don't want to say I got a manual action, but in fact, in all of my years doing this, we've only been able to get one once when we tried on a test site, and again, it was like super aggressive, spammy link stuff. But other than that, I haven't seen one, so I don't know. How about you? You said you
I
saw
got
one, right?
one.
Yeah.
One recently. Yeah, I was actually like, oh my gosh, finally seen a site that got one. It was a small business too, because I was like, does Google hand out these to local businesses? I don't know. We rarely see it. So yeah, there was a local business that got one. They hired a company to do link building, and they went. It was pretty aggressive. They went from like no links to like 100 within a couple months, and that's just the ones that Ahrefs saw. Like Ahrefs does not pick up on every link that you get, right? So it's a huge caveat there. And I analyzed them and oh my gosh, they were so bad. Like, I mean, when I say bad, like we're talking, they just took the same piece of content, rewrote it 50 times, posted the same exact thing on 50 different sites. They were posting from accounts that are like, also talking about like cryptocurrency and like really spammy topics. You'd pull up the sites they were posted on and you could barely move around because there's so many ads. Like these are literally the sites that Google is saying they're trying to target. So again, when you have all your links coming from sites like that, it's really easy for Google to go, okay, yeah, like this is spam. Like it's just so obvious. It was ridiculously obvious. So yeah, I think that's the only example I have seen in like, I don't know, better half of a decade. Like it's been a very long time. So I would say that manual actions for links are still very uncommon, and Google has figured out how to deal with most of this algorithmically, fortunately. So there's that. Here is another question. What about trading links? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I in the pre-show I pulled up Google's documentation on their link spam policies, and they say excessive reciprocal linking, right? And so, look, if first of all, if reciprocal linking is your primary link building strategy, you're barking up the wrong tree. Now, does that mean we say this, and then everybody's like, "Oh, I don't want to link to anybody because I'm worried. I don't want to do this reciprocal linking." But if you're like, I think about even like what we're doing here. If I did a blog post on Attorney Sync's blog and said, "Hey, local U, or we're sponsoring local U's event," and local U does a post and they said link to Attorney Sync, is that a link exchange? Technically it's a reciprocal link, but is that what I'm worried about? No. Now, on the other hand, in the past, you'd see, especially in legal, you'd see a bunch of lawyers get together and they'd be in these mastermind groups and they'd be like, let's all link to each other. And, they'd have a page that was like, maybe they call it a resource page or something, or partners page. And you have a bunch of the same firms all linking to each other. Like, yeah, those are easy ones to figure out. And so, I tell people, like, look, number one, the other thing you have to think about is the effectiveness. Even if it's not going to penalize you, which, maybe it would, but you think Google's putting a lot of impetus and link value on a bunch of sites linking together, like just linking one for one links? Like, that's not really how it works. And so, and again, especially if you've got firms that are competitors, those types of things, like, it's very easy for Google to devalue those types of link patterns, in my view. So I wouldn't waste a lot of time doing that. And I wouldn't be afraid of it, though. If you're doing co-marketing stuff that leads to reciprocal links, I wouldn't be afraid of that. Just don't do it as like we're trying to do that.
For sure. Yeah, we've had clients actually that have written for each other that are very related, like personal injury lawyer and a physical therapist, right? Like both of them have expertise in their area and they could talk about it, for each other kind of thing. And I think that's a really natural way to do it. So yeah, there's lots that is totally fine. I think that again, people get too extreme with their thoughts. I'm like, oh, I don't want to upset Google, and it's like, no, you're fine. Um, let's talk about like link building tactics that don't work as well as they used to. So, are there any in particular out of all the different link building strategies that you guys have pulled back on at your agency that you used to do a lot more of like 5 years ago?
So, it's a great question. I think for me, it's a change in approach. So, and the one that I think about is, like, we'll talk about scholarships, right? So, a long time ago, people would be like, oh, we're going to do scholarship link building campaigns so that we can get these links from like these .edu sites, and then they got abused. And so every university has 5,000 law firm scholarships on their scholarship pages. And so we don't do that. But does that mean that I'm not doing scholarships anymore? It's like, no. I think local scholarships in your local community that are earning links from like, local schools and local news sites, super effective. And so, I don't think of anything that, we just stopped. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we never did that used to be popular. I mean, blog post spam, link spam was a huge thing. It seems like it's still going on, even though most people have, really, people have removed comments from most of the internet because of, blog comment link spam. We never really did that, but that's one that I think a lot of people did in the past that they don't do so much anymore. But for me, it's more about just evolving how we do it. And again, I'm very focused, local business. I'm focused on topically and geographically relevant links. And so the strategies of how to get those, like there's some of them we've been doing a long time. It's just like how we do them might have changed.
I know this isn't really link related, but I can't help myself. I do want to comment on something you said there. Removing comments. I agree. Everybody's doing it. Like I write for publications that used to have comments in the SEO world, and 99% of them don't have comments anymore. That's a mistake, like a big
I
mistake.
agree.
Yeah, like we have comments still enabled on all of our sites. We get really good questions. It helps with our SEO. Like for sure, people ask questions. Those are, keywords. They're things that people search.
It's user-generated content.
Exactly what Google wants, like
Right.
exactly what they're rewarding, and people are removing it. I'm like, guys, you do have to moderate it. That's the thing, right? Everyone wants this like automated, easy approach. And I'm like, no, you have to moderate your comments. You have to actually approve it so that you don't get a bunch of Viagra links on your website, like for sure. But provided you moderate them, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot if you remove them. Like I just think that
Totally
was the
agree.
wrong approach.
I'm so glad we're aligned on that. When this first started happening, I was like sad. I was like, this is a huge mistake. It's bad for the web, and now it's like, and you see, it's like, follow us on Twitter to join the conversation. I'm like, no, the conversation should be happening here.
Don't make people leave their platform. Whatever they're on, don't make them leave it. That's like marketing 101. All right, I'll get off my high horse there. Okay, so I have a couple questions that are very specific. So I don't actually know. I've never heard of this site. Have you heard of Design Rush? I'm not familiar with it.
I've heard of them. I think that my short answer is, well, what's the question, first of all?
Is it a good site to link to? I don't know if you meant to say link to or link from.
I would say I'm going to make a blanket statement that I don't like to make, but probably for most businesses, probably does nothing for you. It's one of these, you see these SEO companies, they have like these link campaigns running in the background. It's the same sites because either they're, open submission sites or free profile sites. They're not topically relevant. They've got, all sorts, maybe they've got, I don't want to speak to Design Rush, but a lot of them, they'll have like, they're heavy AdSense. Like those are the types of things where I'm like, it probably isn't going to hurt you, but it's probably not going to move the dial for you, especially in a competitive SERP either.
Yeah, and I know like it can be hard. So I'm going to give a tactical way that you can know if a link matters or not. Because I did a like 2 to 3 year long journey to try and figure this out. So not to give away the presentation I'm going to be giving at our upcoming event, because I want everybody to come. So make sure you come to Detroit. But basically my presentation is going to be talking about how I figured out like how do you measure the value of link. And the number one thing you should look for is if the page that is linking to you is even in Google's index. And this is what I found with a lot of like scholarship pages, for example. So many of them aren't even indexed. So what value is that link bringing to you as far as an SEO perspective is zero. And most of these sites, like where you can submit free profiles, do not get indexed. The majority of them, like whopping majority. So that should be your number one thing. And it's kind of weird, like no link tool has that as like the feature. Like you don't see that in a lot of the major tools. Like, is this in Google's index? Like should be the number one thing that you look for, because anything not in Google's index doesn't matter.
And a great point. And, that's why I love Screaming Frog, because Screaming Frog will tell you if it's indexed, and then you can pull in link metrics from third party, Ahrefs and SEMrush and everything. And so you can actually see that, or there's a lot of different ways to do it, but 100%, that's like a really, really important thing for people to realize.
Yeah, so I want to talk about some very specific types of link building. And we talked about one already, so I'll leave off scholarship, but guest posting. Guest posting, I want to say, sounds spammy. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, guest posting. They think about their inbox and the 5 million emails that they get asking if, they'll publish on their site. Do you guys do guest posting? We like to call it content contribution. I feel like it sounds less spammy, but do you guys do it at your agency? And if so, what do you look for to figure out if a site is worth submitting an article to?
Yes, we do. And there's another great question. And another one that goes in the bucket of like, some people will say that's an old SEO spammy thing to do. But the issue is like, contributing to other sites, especially relevant sites. I mean, I love the example of the, rehabilitation center with the personal injury lawyer. If a personal injury lawyer is like, hey, I'm writing this post of things that people that are going through rehab that have recently been in a car accident should know about navigating the legal system, and you publish something and you link back, whether it's through a contextual link or an author byline or some other resource on your site, do that all day. It works. It's great for attracting visitors. You might actually get some clients or customers, depending on what your business is. On the other hand, you get an email that's like DA 97 publisher site, and you look at the site and it's just, most of these sites too, you can just tell by looking at them. You're just like, this isn't even a real site. Those we wouldn't do. And so, do I say guest blogging's dead, quote unquote? No. I mean, we do guest posting, a content contribution. I think about it in the context of local. If you do a speaking engagement at a local high school and like they have a student newspaper that covers what's going on at the school, and you contribute an article for that or something about your local community, that's a fantastic way to earn great visibility. And also, in my opinion, like really, really awesome local links.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that. So we do it as well. This is the one type of link building that actually we've gone the opposite way. We never used to do it. Now we do it a lot. And I think the reason why is because, like, in my 2-year journey that I'm going to talk about in my presentation, it's like basically seeing if we could measure the results of a link. So I did a bunch of tests and built a bunch of links. And I wanted to know, like, if I build a link, can I actually see an increase in ranking? And can I isolate it? Like, can I make sure there's nothing else that's causing that increase? Because I think the problem with SEOs is they do like 50 things in a given month, and like nobody can actually split it apart and figure out what's doing what. So a lot of credit sometimes does get given to links that didn't do anything. It was actually like some on-site thing they did. And I think that's one of the problems I've seen with guest posting is most agencies approach this and they look for numbers. They want, 10 a month, 12 a month, whatever. It's really hard to hit that number with
Yeah.
anything. Like you can't. So I really caution people, like, even if you get like 1 or 2 a month, as long as you know they worked and you can tie it back to like an increase in traffic or ranking, which you can. I'm literally going to show that in my presentation, several examples of like 1 link or 2 links and like boom, like traffic increase. It's possible. But again, scaling, like it doesn't scale well. This thing, it's like the more you try and scale it, the more likely it is you're posting on sites that literally don't even have these articles indexed. Like they're not in Google's index whatsoever, and they're carbon copies of other things online.
100%. And that's why, that's another thing too that is implicit in what you just said, but this is not a volume game. Not all links are created equally. We because we've been around this for so long, we probably just like, it's just secondhand to us, but people should know that. I mean, even if you just go back to basic PageRank algorithm, you can go look it up. It's links into a page versus links out. And even though Google has evolved a lot, the point is that a really, high quality link. I mean, the one that I use as an example all the time is small law firm site. We crawled a local municipality website, like a local, I think it was a city or a county or something, and it was old school broken link building. They were linking to stuff that didn't exist on the web anymore. We created something that was responsive to the link, send an email to the municipality, got the link, and boom, like in the local pack. And it's like, is that going to work every time? No. And I don't want people to, just go out and start hammering the municipalities now for broken link building. But that example is just like, it was clear as day to me that it was like, we didn't do much else. It wasn't a ton of content. And look, link building's hard. Is you're not going to always find those kind of broken links that they're actually going to work. But when you find the right ones, gosh, they really do move the dial more than anything else in my experience.
You don't need a lot. That's
You don't
what
need a
people don't
lot.
understand. They're like, oh, I need 400 links. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, if you're getting 400 links, I guarantee you 90% of them are probably doing nothing for you. And again, really easy to tell. So we use a tool called Index Checker, and you can literally dump in a list of like 400 links, and it'll tell you what percentage are indexed. It's horrifying. I've looked at link building reports that have been sent to me where people are paying literally like $50,000 a year for these links, and I put them in, and like 90% of them aren't even in Google's index. And I'm like, well, you wasted 90% of your money. But you know what? Like it's not actually that hard to eliminate the ones that Google's not paying attention to, because this is how they have solved the problem. They do not index these pages. They go after these sites, which is actually Lisa's really, really good question here. What do you think about paid guest posts? Because that's a whole nother thing. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a hard one. So there's a lot, and there's gonna be a lot of nuance in here. So just for clarity, you can go look at Google's. People here are sharp, so they already know this. But if you're watching this and this is new to you, Google's official stance is don't pay for links. You pay for links, it's a violation of the quality guidelines. You're going to hurt yourself. Don't buy links. But here's the nuance. Let's go back to some of these examples we've talked about. You do a local sponsorship or you do a local scholarship, and the purpose of the sponsorship is to raise support for the local organization. And maybe it's a youth baseball team or something, and they put a link up. Is that a paid link? You paid that organization, they put a link up. You do a co-marketing thing, local we're co-marketing. You put a link up. You got sponsors. Google will say those sponsored links should be no followed. And, I think they've got the, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what the protocol you're supposed to add to it, but something like, sponsored or something to the link. I think those are fine. I mean, again, people that work at Google, maybe they want to devalue those. I think it'd be bad PR for Google to start issuing manual actions for people who are supporting local youth sports leagues. But hey, they did hammer some people for scholarships. But I think really what the question is like, if you've got a public site that's saying, send us guest posts and we'll pay, or vice versa, you pay us to be posted on our site. Those are more problematic and easy for Google to determine. But again, I think in the local context where you're like, maybe you're paying a journalist to go write content and it happens to generate a link as part of that content production, I'm not as worried about it. If it's a site that's brokering links, it's like, hey, look, $100 a link and everybody's doing it and they're public about it and those patterns are obvious, those are more problematic. And again, my view of those is that most of those, 80%, I'll throw out a random number, are probably doing nothing. Some of them might hurt, but most of them are probably doing nothing. And the other thing I wanted to bring up in the context of like trying to identify good prospects, in addition to indexing, go look at where there's link intersection between competitors who are ranking for a query. If a bunch of your competition that are ranking for the query have links from a particular domain, especially we see this with directories all the time, right? Because you think about it, it's like, well, a directory could be paid, legal directory. Is that you paid the directory for a link? Some of them no follow them. Some of them put the proper tagging on them. Some of them, though, they don't. It's just, you get a followed link from the directory. Are those getting hammered? I'm not seeing that. And guess what? Those directory sites, as of right now, they're ranking really well themselves. So those sites aren't getting hammered either. And so anyway, there's a lot of nuance in there, but I focus on the relevance component. If it's a legal directory and you're at a law firm website, I think the visibility there, whether it's paid or not paid, is great. If it's a Avo is a legal website that you can submit contributions to. Even if you pay for like a monthly like bundled service with them and that gives you the ability to contribute content, I would say game on for that. But the ones that are like not relevant at all, it's like some random article directory, there's some random news site or something, like you can just tell it's not even a real site and they're accepting money for links. I think you can pretty much ignore those.
Yeah, I did look at a bunch recently. There's a tool that I was analyzing that allows you to do that. They allow you to pay for a link and you could go in and you can select sites based on your topical like authority and stuff. So you could say, look, I'm a lawyer. I want sites that are related to law. Or you could say I'm a realtor. I want sites that are related to real estate. And you could filter it. And at first it looked really cool until I started putting all the sites into Ahrefs and I saw the same trend over and over. They are tanking as of the last month. Like their number of organic pages that rank on Google. So the organic pages metric is a metric in Ahrefs that we look at a lot because it gives you an idea of how many pages on that site are currently ranking. And if you're contributing to that site, you want that number to be high. And we're gonna get to this when we talk about citations, but like these sites, basically those numbers are just like falling off a cliff. And that's a sign to me that Google's onto them. And I don't think it's hard for Google either, because once you start accepting paid posts and you don't have limits on what industry and whatever, like you're going to get stuff that's like crypto, you're going to get stuff that's like casinos. And like once you start getting that stuff on your site, it's like very easy for Google to just be like, oh yeah, ding that site.
Right. And if you don't have the budget for one of those tools, the other thing that I always tell people, I'm like, you want to know what Google thinks are the most relevant pages for a query? Go search on Google. You know, if those sites that come up, Google's telling you, we think that these are the pages that are most relevant. These are the sites that are most relevant. So, you know, if you've got a site that you're considering, go see if it ranks for the queries that it's optimized for. If it's not ranking, it's probably Google probably is not putting a lot of credence into it. You know, if it's coming up the first page for a lot of the queries that it's optimized for, then it probably is probably okay. But then there's also the whole issue of like, I always think of it like a kind of like an eyeball test, because you never know if you're looking at a site that Google wants to demote, but they haven't gotten around to it for a variety of reasons. So anyway, I think that's why you got to have a multi-pronged approach to thinking about this. Is it indexed? Do a bunch of my competitors who are ranking have it? Is it ranking for queries it's optimized for? If you've got access to third-party tools, does it have a history of trending up or trending down? I think those are all good things to look at and when you're considering link prospects.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to ZipSprout here, because I know you're talking about sponsorships. They have a pretty cool tool that allows you to find like sponsorship opportunities in specific geos. I know they've sponsored several of our local U events, so it's kind of a cool tool to help make that process a little smoother. All right, before we get to citations, because I really do think that is the thing that local SEO, I'm already seeing questions about it. I do want to just stop and really quickly just make sure everybody's aware the details of our upcoming event. So in June, we're going to be in Detroit. I'll get Richard to put it up on the screen. We really want to see you guys there. It is, we're doing 2 in-person events this year. This is the first one. And we slashed our prices to try and appeal to more people. I have seen the trend. I speak at a lot of conferences. Conference attendance is down since the pandemic. It is a fact. I'm not going to deny it. So we're like, you know what? We want to make sure people come. So we actually cut our prices by like 70%. We've never had prices this low. I don't know if we will again. It really depends on how this goes, but it's $300 to get a ticket for a full day. I'll be speaking, Guy will be speaking. We've got some really incredible talks lined up. I'm going to show stuff about link building that I promise you has never been presented before by anybody else. Like I answered questions that I always was asking that I felt like I didn't know the answers to. So it's going to be really awesome. I really hope to see you guys there in Detroit. All right, so back to this. Citations. Let's talk about citations. A lot of studies talk about how citations were like the link building thing for local SEOs for years. And then recent kind of things have been coming out saying, oh, they're not as effective as they used to be, and maybe you shouldn't do them. What are you guys doing at your agency when it comes to citations?
Well, sadly, it's just like everything else. It's like we still do, major legal directories, table stakes, got to have them.
Yeah.
Are we trying to track down like every legal directory.biz site we can possibly find? Absolutely not. And so again, it's another one where it's not a volume game. You look, I prioritize based on what sites are ranking for your queries. So, in legal, you see Justia, you see Super Lawyers, FindLaw, Avo, lawyers.com. Those major ones, I would still build citations there, and I would still get links from those sites. Overall, as like because people have been, what's the value of citations? Look, I don't think that you got to do volume on citations, but I do think you want a presence on these major sites. I do think that Google's looking. I mean, if you go look at some of the links that we posted, showing up on major legal directory with the correct information, correct NAP, correct website URLs and stuff like that. To me, that's table stake stuff, though. Everybody can do that. And that's the thing I keep telling people. I'm like, if all of your competitors can do it, it's at best, it's table stake. No, I say table stakes. I mean, at best, it's like you have to do it, but it's not going to move the dial, right? You've got to find ways to go get links from places that are relevant, that your competitors aren't getting the links. Because if you have, all things being equal, let's say you've got 2 sites, they're competing for the same query, and they have all the same link profile, there's nothing there for Google to distinguish. Now, does that mean that I just stop doing citations altogether? Absolutely not. You've got to be there. It's that's just like the basics, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been doing some tests on citations that I haven't published yet, and we are going to publish them on our YouTube channel. So, I feel like a lot of people here are already subscribed, but definitely make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to get those when they come out. But some of them are really interesting. One of the things I'm noticing with citations, the majority of them are not indexed, like whopping majority. I looked at one client recently who had about 700 or so citations. Again, multiple locations, so they weren't. There was maybe 100 per location kind of thing, but they were paying a lot of money annually for a specific company that I'm not going to name for their citations that's very popular. And we're going to tell them to cancel it because out of their like 700 or whatever, I believe 5 or 6%, and I might have that number slightly wrong. So, pay more attention to whenever I release the video. I've got the number there. About 5 or 6% were indexed. Like it was obscene how many were not indexed. And it's like, why? Again, this is some of what I'm digging into in my presentation at Local U, but it's like, why would Google keep these sites indexed? They're all exactly the same. Like, what can you go, we talk about like Judy's book was one that came up recently at a conference I was at. I'm like, yeah, like, what does Judy's book have that you can't get on Yelp? Like, nothing. Like, they don't have
And
user
again,
generated content.
I don't know. I don't do a ton with Judy's book. Does Judy's book rank? I haven't seen Judy's book in a lot of the SERPs that I've been
No.
in. Right.
So put some of these directories into Ahrefs. It's really funny. And then click the organic pages metric and just watch the like tanking. Like it's over, like if you extend to like 5 years, like this is why they're not effective anymore. Because when you do branded searches on Google, you can see what directories are ranking. And the ones you're talking about, Guy, they're often there. Like, super lawyers, Ava, whatever. Like if you're a lawyer, those actually rank. And why do they rank? Because those sites actually get user generated content. And Judy's book doesn't, like it used to, but it just doesn't. So I think citations, it's a quick answer on like why they're not as effective. They're not getting indexed, but also like we tried to force index some. That doesn't even work. Like often you can get pages that don't automatically get indexed into Google all like by themselves. You can get them indexed through lots of various ways. We couldn't even like accomplish that. I'm like, these are such bad sites that like they're like, nope, fail, can't even get it indexed. Like there's literally no way to get it in there.
That's
I'm
why
not.
it's so. I mean, again, this is like old school, but just search, just Google it. If it's showing up, search your query. Any vertical that's got major directories, if they're the ones that are showing up, those are the ones you would need to be in. The massive ones that are like every business in the world. Like, guess what? That's what Google wants to be. So why are they? I mean, we've gone back and forth even about like Yelp, and again, people say, should I pay for Yelp? And I'm like, well, does Yelp actually appear for search queries that are relevant to your business? Is it, you're going to pick up actual like business from Yelp? Then maybe you need to be there. And Yelp's a major one. I give Yelp a hard time. You probably want to be at least have your profile filled out in Yelp. But yeah, these obscure ones, it's like you can make it really easy for yourself just by seeing if they show up for relevant queries in Google.
Or any of your competitors' names. Like really, you're not going to see them at all. It's so frustrating to me how many companies brag about how many sites they'll get you listed on when 90% of those sites do nothing. And it's the wrong metric, but it works for whatever reason. People buy it. Business owners buy it. They're like, oh, I get 100 citations. I believe our list of how many that we do is like 10. Like we have it so small. Again, depending on the industry, there are a lot in legal. I want to say legal is a weird industry, but we have other industries like insurance. There's like none. There's no like niche sites in that industry that rank anywhere or do anything that you'd want to be listed on. So it really does vary based on the industry a lot, but it's really easy to tell once you just look at that site, see how much organic traffic they're getting, but not just organic traffic, but how many pages of that site are in Google's index. That's really the question you want to answer. All right, we got this question related to citations. What about data aggregators?
Yeah, again, majors, if you're getting in on some of these major feeds, I think a lot of times too, it's like it depends on like kind of where you are in your local SEO journey. If you're a brand new site, I think brand new business, or you open a new office location, I think getting populated by an aggregator is fine. It's not maybe something you need to do on an ongoing basis. Again, I think most of the, for legal, you've got a good list of most of the legal directories and most of like the, call it what top, whatever, less than 100 major sites. You could even do them by hand. And, again, it's like, this is where, to me, this is why all this stuff, it's always in the context of what's the resource allocation, because in a perfect world, if you unlimited resources, sure, you can get listed on all these sites. Not going to hurt you, especially the ones you're not paying for. But if you're prioritizing, the aggregators on cost benefit, some of them you can get populated on a bunch of sites much more quickly. If you move businesses and you want a massive, you need a change on a lot of sites really quickly, aggregators I think are valuable. But if the aggregator is pitching, oh, get listed on these obscure sites, you can cut it, is my answer to that. But it's good for if you're not manually keeping your listings updated, or somebody's not doing that for you, it might be worth subscribing to an aggregator.
Yeah,
But it's
I
not going to
personally,
move the dial.
yeah, no, I wouldn't pay a fee, a repetitive fee, I should say. If it's a one-time fee, cool. But also, like, there's like what, like two aggregators that even exist anymore. Like, there's not very many, so it's definitely not worth paying annually for. You're not going to see an ROI. I had a guy the other day was talking about how he wanted to update Yahoo Local because it was wrong, and I was like, dude, if that's the only reason why you're signing up for Yext, don't do it. Like, you're not going to get an ROI on that, whatever, $500 or $600 a year. It's not going to happen. I guarantee it. So
Right.
yeah, if that's your goal, you're kind of wasting your money. Here's another question about a strategy podcast guest interviews. Have you done anything with this for small businesses? I think it's easier to do this for like marketing companies. Like, I'm on podcasts a lot, but like small business owners, are there lots of podcast opportunities for them? And do these types of links help?
Yes, and again, it's back in the same thing we talked about. It can be abused. Do I think that if you're on some random podcast and a link, it depends on the site and if it's relevant, all that kind of stuff. But even I think this is a good time to bring this up. We were getting ready for this talk. I was thinking back to I think it was like 2012. I think it was that when it was, maybe it was MozCon, but Will Reynolds was talking about real company stuff. And to me, that's really what small business should be thinking about in this context, because if you're a local business and there's a local podcast, maybe they're covering your local community, or maybe they cover your industry. So I see some of these, like even lawyers will have their own podcasts, and maybe there's opportunities for referrals and you're getting links from that. Well, look, if you're getting a link from another law firm's website, that's topically extremely relevant. And if that site's like ranking for legal queries, Google thinks it's relevant. And so if you're a guest on that podcast and they link back to your site, I think that's a great link. If you're just out there just accepting, and the other thing too, people got to remember, podcast guesting is like a whole lead gen thing, right? Like podcast businesses will start podcasts, invite guests so that they can pitch them on their thing. Those links, like you're getting a bunch of links from like SEO companies who are like, come be on my podcast. And oh, by the way, I want to pitch you on SEO. Not relevant. But you're a local business and you got local podcasters or local blogs, same thing with blogging. Getting picked up on those and getting links from those sites, I think that's extremely valuable. And again, I think there's all sorts of good signaling there. There's the SEO link signaling. It's locally relevant. It's topically relevant. And then on top of that, you might be getting visitor traffic, referral traffic from that. You might be getting qualified leads. It's good PR. It's good demand generation from a branding standpoint. So that's the other thing I tell people, don't think about link building in this vacuum. Think about all of the indirect benefits of good link prospecting and link building.
Yeah, it's not easy. And this is like a very good question. In a world where people are obsessed with domain authority or, number of links, how do you get clients to buy in to the quality versus quantity? Like if you have a client, for example, that like you spend 6 months getting a link, how do you explain to them that it was worth it?
Totally. That's a great question. And, it starts with education. It's having this kind of conversation. But, I think again, that's why if you're explaining link building in the context of more traditional notions of marketing and all of the other benefits around it, I think it becomes an easier sell. But again, and I remember it was you, me, and Greg. Actually, I was thinking the last time we shared a stage, I think it was State of Search in Dallas a couple of years ago. But at that time, and a lot of my things is still similar to even that conversation, which is, you got to explain to people that you're not trying to, you don't need to rule the link building campaign. It's not a volume based game. Links aren't all equal. You're going to get additional business benefits like traffic from relevant sites. It's going to be good for brand awareness in your local community. And then, when push comes to shove, though, and this is why I'm so excited for your talk in Detroit, at the end of the day, you can show that as you are earning new links, your rankings and traffic and phone calls and every other thing, all those business metrics that you care about, they're going to go up. And again, it's like, don't obsess about just link numbers. So people that are like, all I care about is the number of links, or like a pay per link type of thing. It's the wrong approach, because the links aren't all equal. And again, you can get that, if it took us, to your point, if it took us 6 months to get that one link from that municipality site, and a lot of work went into that, and it ends up causing the phone to start ringing, you're not going to care about how many links you've got. On the other hand, we see it all the time where people are like, look, I paid for all these links and it didn't do anything. Well, they're ripe for the conversation of like, look, this is not a volume-based game. These, look at all these links. None of them are actually, to your point, look at how many of them aren't indexed. Look at how many of them are sites that aren't trafficked. They're not relevant. And so that's how we have the conversation. But at the end of the day, when we're talking to clients, it takes a lot of education. And there's a lot of bad habits that we have to fix, because there is a lot of misinformation about there. Right now, of course, we've got to remind people that actually links are important, because right now everybody's talking about how links are dead.
Yeah. I mean, guys, it's really easy. Like, I get people all the time that ask me to evaluate their link building strategies. And it's like, easiest way to do that, throw all the links into index checker, pull it out, tell them, okay, 90% of your links here aren't even indexed. So the 10% maybe helped, but the 90% definitely didn't do anything. And you can make like definite statements like that. I'll tell you, at my agency, what we did to try and make it easier to convey this to clients is we separated the measuring of link building. So for example, let's say we have a dentist that we optimize their dental implants page because they care about that. We would look and see, okay, like we optimized the page, we did all the on-site stuff. How are they ranking compared to where they were? Measure that. Then we say, okay, let's go get like one link. And literally, I'm not even kidding you. We order like one link to that page and then see what happens to the ranking and the traffic. And you can separate those two things. It's actually not even that hard. And again, one link, and you can actually go back to the client and be like, this one link got you this. Whereas like most link building agencies, I feel like, that do tens of hundreds of links cannot tell you. They might look at like overall site traffic or like maybe something, but I haven't seen a lot of reports that specifically say like, well, this happened because of this. And a lot of them are doing on-site work and link building at the same time for the same page, and they cannot separate the two, which I think is a problem.
You also alluded to something that's really, really important, which is deep linking, right? So everybody's trying, all these citation sites, these directory sites go into home pages, right? But if you look at the landscape, the stuff that really can help is if you've got an internal page that's ranking for the query, a lot of the other sites the competitive sites that you're going to look at, they might have links site wide, but that specific page might not have any links. And those are ripe for, you're in the 2 spot and you've got someone ahead of you that's on a more authoritative domain. This reminds me of that municipality one, because it was the same situation. It was an internal link that we built, and that page jumped a site that had a much higher quote unquote domain authority, of much more domain wide linking root domains. And so that's the other thing we always tell people, like, get that relevance all the way down to the page level. So if you've got, if you use a bad example, but say you're doing a speaking event on dental implants. Well, when you go and speak and they're going to promote that speaking engagement with content on their site, don't just give them your homepage URL, give them a page on your site that's about dental implants, or giving them a deeper page. Or, we do a lot of them for us, because it's such a reputation business. Links to bio pages or deeper pages in the site, I think, make a much bigger difference than just like trying to aggregate all your links. And that's an unnatural pattern. It's not natural for all of your links to be going just to your homepage.
Yeah, no, I actually agree. And I think homepage links are one of the ones that are the least measurable, right? You have so many, and it's like, okay, you add another link to your homepage. How do you measure that? How do you quantify if a person spent a ton of money on that? So I do want to quickly ask you one question. Actually, before I do that, our next webinar, I just want to make sure everybody's aware. We're going to be doing another live audit session because our last one just went so well. So we want to do some more live audits. Richard, is there a link if they scan this, they can submit their sites to be audited live? We basically are auditing sites for free. So it's a really great opportunity to have Brandon and Colin featured here audit your site for free live. They will pick it apart. They will tell you what you need to change. Make sure you get your site submitted to that to get a free live audit, and then register to make sure that you get notified when that happens. All right. So last question, maybe. We'll see. I might have time for one more. Budget. Let's talk about this. Okay. So you got a small business. They generally don't have large SEO budgets. What would you say is a good amount of money that people need to be spending before they even think about doing link building?
Yeah, so I'm going to be super annoying, and it's going to be, it depends, but it's
Oh my
got to
God.
be it's got to be in the context of how competitive the SERPs that you are. So you got to go look at the competitive landscape. But for me, when we talk to a lot of small law firms that don't have big budgets, the question really is like, okay, here's what I have. Maybe I have a couple thousand, maybe I have $5,000 to spend on link building or SEO or whatever it is. And I would say, get local, go sponsor, get involved in your local community, find prospect sites that of other local businesses that you might highlight. I love the idea of like, hey, we're going to do a contest where you can win a free gift card to a local restaurant. So it's like the sport local thing. You build content around that. The money that you're paying for, in my view, is whether it's the paying for the gift card, and then I think that putting some promotional assets, and you're going to invest some money around the content around it. So that's the challenge, though, is like, what counts as a budget for link building is doing local content that promotes other local businesses that earns links. Is that link building? Because if it is, that's where I would start spending my money, because again, in my experience, that seems to be the thing that gives you the most bang for your buck, is geographically and topically relevant sites that you get links from. That's where I would invest most of my money. But look, if you're in Chicago and you're a personal injury lawyer in Chicago and you want to rank for those queries, get ready, because it's going to be expensive. I mean, most of those sites that are ranking, when you go look at their link profiles, they've got links from all the major directories, other major sites, and it costs money.
Okay.
So anyway.
But I want to get more specific. I'm a personal injury lawyer. I'm in a town of 15,000. I want to pay you $1,000 a month. Would you do link building or no?
Gosh,
my answer would be no, like flat no, like not even.
I not ongoing, but like, again, would I do a local contest? Like, would I take that $1,000 and go and be like, hey, let's go do a thing? But yeah, I think just running in the background link building, probably not needed.
You're such an SEO with your it depends. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, at Sterling
I'm a
Sky,
lawyer too.
That's true. We are $2,800 a month, which is like our minimum. We can do a tiny bit of link building, not much. I usually tell people if they want more link building, $5,000 a month. That's like the kind of budget you should be looking at, which I realize is not doable for every small business. But also not every small business needs a lot of link building, like we've talked about.
That's right. And that's, I think that's the big thing is that it's in the context of the competition. If other sites are ranking in your local community without a lot of links, you might only need one link. You might only need a handful of links, and you'll see. And so that's why it's, to me, it's monitoring the positions, it's monitoring the local landscape, seeing what the competition's doing. And that should inform your strategy. But yeah, I wish I could give you just like a flat, like, oh yeah, just this is the minimum you need to spend. But it really does. It's different for all sorts of different businesses and all sorts of different locations.
All right, we are at time. Last question. You got 10 seconds to answer. So I want a yes or no. BBB, right. Worth it? Yes or no?
No.
Oh, interesting. I would say yes. All right, we'll end with that.
What? How much? Well, how much does BBB cost?
Oh, it depends. It's like a few $100s a year usually,
Okay,
but
so
yeah,
you know, if you have a few $100s a year to spend on SEO, don't do BBB. If you have a few thousand, do BBB.
fair. Good answer. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. See you next time.